Day on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, let's face it, the country is in a bit of a mess. I was trying to think of nicer ways of putting that, but I can't really. I mean, come on, we all know the situation of it, don't we? Where are the politicians then? Well, on holiday is the short answer. Is it indeed the summer? Parliament is in recess, but should it be? The calls for Parliament to be recalled are growing louder. Gordon Brown, do you remember him? I always remember him. I'll tell you for why I remember him. Do you remember that Gillian Duffy comment when she called him a bigot because the microphone was left on? That taught me a very valuable lesson in life, so it did. Always make sure your microphone is switched off when you leave the room. Anyway, I digress. The point is, do you think that Parliament should be recalled now to bring heads together to come up with a plan as to how we are going to get on top of this cost of living crisis and more? You tell me. And also, if you've ever been speeding, you will perhaps have been offered a speed awareness course. Did you know, though, that there's such a thing for hate crime awareness? I'm not laughing at people committing hate crimes, of course. I just think it's all getting a little bit ludicrous. If you send a tweet that someone else doesn't like, should you have to go off and spend 2 hours or an hour in a classroom being taught how to rethink? I would say no, and Hampshire police seem to agree with me because today they have scrapped their hate awareness course. Is that the right decision? And the youth of today, we all look back, don't we, and say to ourselves, oh, it was all so different in my day, but I've got to say it really was, particularly when it comes to work ethic. I remember, for example, having multiple Saturday jobs. I remember working after school, working anywhere actually that would have me, paper rounds, you name it. But times have changed. Those work opportunities are not a thing anymore. So where do kids get their money? Pocket money, I hear you say, but no, even that is on the decline now. £4.99 a week is the average that under 16s are earning. And if they can't graft to earn their pocket money, they can't get Saturday jobs, how and where do kids get their work ethic from? You tell me. We'll have all that to come, but first, let's catch up on tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. The top stories on GB News tonight. Merton Council in London says an incident where a child was killed when a house collapsed was the result of a gas explosion. The Met Police believes the victim was a 4-year-old girl. Neighbouring properties were also damaged by the blast in Thornton Heath in South London. 3 other people have been taken to hospital and a 4th person was treated at the scene. The London Fire Brigade says the case will now be passed to the police to investigate.
Unfortunately, we can't say it is a gas that's caused it. It will become a police investigation now. We dealt with the emergency phase of the incident and we hand it over to local authorities and local police. There is a number of properties that have suffered damage from the blast itself, and at the moment there are 40 properties that have been evacuated for that reason.
Downing Street has rejected a call by the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown to hold an emergency COBRA meeting to address the cost of living crisis. Boris Johnson's spokesman says he'll speak to his Chancellor to ensure planned support measures remain on track. The crisis has been at the centre of the leadership race recently. Liz Truss wanting immediate tax cuts and an emergency budget next month so national insurance hikes can be scrapped. Supporter of Truss and former Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis argues that tax cuts and inflation management aren't mutually exclusive.
What we want to do, and what Liz Truss wants to do, is get on top of and deal with the challenges that we're seeing with inflation, get inflation under control, but also be putting more money in people's pockets. Some people are arguing that you can do one or the other. It's just not the case. Actually, you can look at how you deal with inflation whilst also keeping a low tax economy.
Well, the former Culture Secretary and Rishi Sunak supporter Oliver Dowden told GB News that dealing with inflation takes priority over tax cuts.
the first thing we've got to do is crush this scourge of inflation. That is at the root cause of all of this, and that's why, for example, Rishi was endorsed just last week by Nigel Lawson, one of the best chancellors we've ever had, who served under Margaret Thatcher, who understands the need to crush inflation first because it makes everyone poorer, and then to cut people's taxes for the long term.
The former head of the UK Border Force has welcomed an apparent change in tactics by French police who are trying to stop migrants crossing the English Channel. Officers were photographed puncturing a small boat and smashing up the motor on a beach near Calais. More than 18,000 people, though, have been intercepted by British authorities so far this year. Manchester Crown Court has heard the footballer Ryan Giggs was idolised on the pitch but had an ugly, more sinister side behind closed doors. The former Manchester United winger is on trial accused of assaulting and controlling his ex-girlfriend. The 48-year-old allegedly used controlling and coercive behaviour against Kate Greville between August 2017 and November 2020. He's also charged with assaulting her and her younger sister Emma Greville. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges. The Metropolitan Police strip-searched 650 young people over a 2-year period and in a quarter of cases without an appropriate adult present. The figure has been condemned by children's charities, and the Children's Commissioner has asked for information after a 15-year-old schoolgirl was strip-searched after being wrongly suspected of carrying cannabis. Scotland Yard data shows the hundreds of cases between 2018 and 2020, of which more than 95% were carried out on boys.
It seems like there's a culture of fear that even the good cops don't call out the bad cops who are carrying out their powers inappropriately and sometimes breaching the code of conduct. And that toxicity of it is creating so much trauma on the wider public, in particular young people.
50 properties have been damaged and 4 people rescued after a burst water main flooded an area in North London. Roads were closed as 3 feet of water swept through streets in Islington, creating 2 sinkholes. Thames Water apologised to customers who were affected by the incident, but it comes as several water companies put hosepipe bans in place, with the National Drought Group imposing a prolonged dry weather status onto England. And a heat health alert has been put in place for parts of England from tomorrow until Saturday as the UK braces itself for another heat wave. The UK Health Security Agency is advising people to look out for young children and those who are older or those with existing health conditions. The Meteorological Office says temperatures won't hit the highs of 40 degrees like last time, but they could reach up to 35. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. We've got my panel, David Curtin, who's the leader of the Heritage Party, and the political commentator, Jo Phillips. Good evening to both of you. Jo Phillips has already told me tonight that she thinks I look like a fruit chew today.
They were called fruit salads. They were chews. I bet some of the viewers
fruit salads.
They were called fruit salads. Yeah, they were little chews that you could get with your pocket money, which we're coming on to later. I know.
I do actually think I know what you mean, because
they were stripy.
Were they the same as a little blackjack one that you got a blackjack and a fruit salad?
Oh, I don't know. You might have done where you. I don't know, but they're in the same sort of they're in the same sort of confectionery area.
Oh well, there you go. There is nothing more flattering, ladies and gentlemen, than being told you look like a sticky, sugary bit of junk. But I'll take it as a compliment, Jo Phillips. I'll take it as a compliment. Normally, it's my viewers writing in and saying what they think I'm dressed like, and normally it's either a duvet or my nana's pyjamas curtains or something. Nice. So a fruit chew is a compliment. It's a step up. I'm going up in the right direction anyway. I'll take it. Right, you know the drill on Dewbs & Co as well, don't you? It's not just about us and our thoughts. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email address. You can tweet me at GBNews or at Michelle Dewbs. Some of you guys have been in touch already. Just a quick reminder in case you've just tuned in, I want to talk to you about Parliament. Should it be reconvened to come up with a plan, or is being on summer recess okay? I also want to talk about hate crime awareness courses. Are they needed? Should they be a thing? And also, how do we get work ethic into kids? It's difficult, isn't it? The work, it's not there what we used to do. Newspaper rounds, Saturday jobs, they're all but a thing of the past now, aren't they? So you tell me, how do we make youngsters learn how to graft? Do they even need to graft, or can they just sit in the front of the computers all day long for the future? You tell me. You've been getting in touch already. It was Gordon Brown that was saying maybe we should reconvene Parliament. Pete says, Gordon Brown sold off about a third of our gold at a record low price. I don't think we should be taking advice for him on anything. There you go, that's what Peter says. Doesn't agree with Gordon Brown there at all. In fact, actually, as I'm scrolling through, I think it's safe to say that most of you don't either. John says Gordon should get back in his box. Did he recall Parliament when he ran out of money or during the Iraq War? John doesn't think so. Elizabeth says Gordon Brown is just trying to distract attention from the inflation that his reformed Bank of England created. So in a nutshell, I could go on, but you get the gist. None of you lot are having much of what Gordon Brown says. Why am I talking about it? Well, because there's still 28 days to go before the new Prime Minister takes office. And, said Gordon Brown, has been speaking out today about tackling the cost of living crisis, etc. He's saying it simply can't wait that long. He reckons the leadership candidates need to call a COBRA meeting now or recall Parliament. Apparently, there's no time to lose or people will go hungry and cold this winter. Joe Phillips, I mean, it's undeniable, isn't it, that we are in, some would say, crisis moment in this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think it's right, therefore, that Parliament should be in summer recess?
I don't think there is much to be gained by recalling Parliament, but I do think it would be quite nice and quite reassuring if there was some evidence of some government activity going on. Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party or the Tory MPs, allowed him to stay on as Prime Minister, and he promised he was going to carry on doing the right thing until he handed over to his successor. Clearly, that's not the case. He's been on holiday. The Chancellor's been on holiday. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are too busy out on the campaign trail. Meanwhile, everything has come to a grinding halt. And one of the points that Gordon Brown made was that if you are going to introduce a change to benefits that kick in October, you need to get the computers and all of that system in place now. You can't wait until September. I mean, there are things that could be done, and certainly Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor could be sitting down and saying, right, these are the things that are possible. This is what you would need to do, whichever one of you becomes Prime Minister. The government at the moment can't make any new policy, but it can start putting some things in place, because I think people are beginning to get extremely frightened. We know there's a new energy price cap in October. We've seen what the Bank of England said about inflation, and I think Gordon Brown is absolutely right. You know, it's hard to think of it while the sun is beating down on this and we've got another heat wave alert, but I think come the winter, when people are really thinking about how to heat their homes, it's going to be very tough for people.
Yeah, just a small point to pick up on there. I did notice Gordon Brown was talking about IT changes, but we must also remember that Labour actually presided over probably the worst IT system failure in history. It cost the taxpayers about £12 billion. So I would actually take what Gordon Brown says about IT stuff with a pinch of salt. But that notwithstanding, where do you stand on it? Should Parliament be back?
No, I think Gordon Brown is just grandstanding. I mean, but he doesn't really have anything to say in offering solutions to the crisis. Clearly, there is an inflation crisis at the moment. But, I mean, him, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, none of them have got solutions, but none of them are actually being honest and telling us why we have the crisis. So there's three reasons. One is the obsession with net zero and trying to dismantle our perfectly good energy infrastructure and rely on wind turbines and solar panels to provide energy. It's simply not going to happen, and that's raising the price of energy. It's going through the roof. The other thing is the lockdown, and that wasted £400 billion. Rishi Sunak is responsible for that. So yeah, he's talking about cutting inflation in the future, but he's the one who's responsible for creating the inflation now, or a big part of it, because he's increased the money supply by 25%. So that is going to feed through into inflation. Nothing we can really do about that. And the other thing is the obsession with prolonging the war with Ukraine, which was, with Russia in Ukraine, which was completely avoidable. And that, of course, is having knock-on effects with the price of energy as well, because there's less Russian gas.
So what would you do, David?
If I just finish for just a minute. So there's less Russian gas coming through into Europe, which means there's more of a demand for gas, which we would have. So that's going to push up the prices more. So two things we can do: stop the war with Russia, de-escalate, sit round the table, end the situation, get back to normal relations, and then we're going to have that pressure taken off our energy prices, and then abandon the whole net zero nonsense, which we don't need, because carbon dioxide is not a harmful gas, and the whole of this net zero ideology is based around the premise that carbon dioxide is going to harm the planet, when it's not. We don't need it.
Well, there's a lot of scientists that would absolutely disagree with you, and if I had a climate scientist on here now, they'd be probably jumping out their chair in rage,
I'd
saying
love
that
to talk to a climate scientist.
Well, a lot of my viewers would agree with what you're saying about certainly pressing pause on net zero. But we do all have to be clear, this was in the 2019 Tory manifesto. So everyone that voted the Tories in, they did actually vote for that.
Yeah, well, I think the reason that people voted for the Tories and Boris was because of his mantra, his three-word mantra, get Brexit done. And probably most people didn't read the 50 or 100-page manifesto, which was in there, but they never really mentioned it up front. So, unfortunately, you do have to read all the small print in the manifesto. So it was there, absolutely. But I don't agree with it. I didn't vote for them. And I think now people voted for that, get Brexit done. But now we've got this net zero horror, which is pushing energy prices and inflation through the roof.
How can you say that when there are, we are in a climate catastrophe?
We are not in a climate catastrophe.
I'm sorry,
There
David.
is no climate crisis.
Really?
Absolutely,
What,
there
so
is
the
no
floods-
climate emergency. Well, there's always been floods. I mean, there was a massive,
Not like
flood in
now.
1953, which wiped out the centre
Yes,
of
I
London
know.
and Canvey Island. We haven't had anything like
people
that.
People skated on the Thames.
Look, I don't deny that the temperatures have gone up over the last 200 years.
And why have the temperatures gone up?
Well, look, temperatures have gone up since the start of the Industrial Revolution, absolutely, from 14.0 degrees Celsius to 14.7 degrees Celsius. Not a very big rise over 250 years. That's after the end of the mini ice age, where temperatures were especially low anyway. So now there is no climate emergency, but we're actually damaging the environment for the climate ideology. For example, Drax has stopped burning coal, but they're now cutting down trees in North America, and they're shipping across wood pellets to burn instead of coal, which is harming the environment on the other side of the world. We don't need to do that. We should stick to coal, oil, gas, nuclear, petrol and diesel.
And
that's going to
alleviate. Body in the world says we are facing a climate emergency. The ozone layer has got holes in it. It's perforated like a hanging chad in an American election. Glaciers are melting. Ice shelves are melting. We are seeing huge changes in climate that can't be put down to one-off. Let me finish. I did let you speak, but I'm beginning to think that this sort of, to say we've got or whatever you said, very good energy infrastructure, we clearly haven't, because we're dependent on imported gas.
Yeah, that's because the government, since 2015, has closed 11 of our 14 coal power stations. So there is now a black hole in our energy supply.
So we don't have an efficient energy
Well, we would do if they hadn't have closed the coal power stations because of the climate. Absolutely, it was the wrong decision. We should have kept them open. Then we would have had a sustainable, level supply of energy. We'd have had enough energy to supply us.
So what Joe was pointing out, and I was pointing out as well, is that there are a great number of client scientists, etc., that would strongly disagree with you, that would say whether it's sea levels rising, whether it's temperatures rising, whether it's whatever rising, they would say that we're absolutely in a climate emergency and that all these measures, net zero, some people would actually say, by the way, that the target for net zero should be done quicker. We should be pushing to achieve it quicker than what we currently are, fast-forwarding things. And you don't care about that. You would dispute all of that.
It's not that I don't care about it, it's just I think it's wrong. It's wrong
David,
scientifically.
are you a scientist?
Yes, I am a scientist.
And so what is your research based on? Because
well,
you are beginning to sound a
mentioned
little bit like a flat earth person.
You mentioned a couple of things. I mean, you mentioned the ozone layer, but that's a different problem to carbon dioxide, OK? There is a problem with ozone layer deficiency over the Antarctic area, and then, but that's sort of healing itself. But that's not carbon dioxide. I do not accept the premise that carbon dioxide is harmful and it's going to warm the atmosphere much more than it already
is. Why
is.
don't you accept it when it?
Well, there's 4 molecules of carbon dioxide per 10,000 molecules in the atmosphere. Okay, it's increased by, it's increased from 3 to 4 molecules over the last 100 years or so, but it hasn't caused excessive warming. There's a trend over the last 250 years, as I've said. Temperatures have gone up 0.7 degrees after the mini ice age, and that was after the medieval warm period, where temperatures were much warmer than they are today.
See, I mean, I find this verging on the dangerous, this sort of theory, because we are facing a crisis, and unless we do something about it, we will get to the point where we can't do anything about it.
What would you say to one of my viewers, June, has just written in saying, Joe is saying that all of the scientists agree, etc., but Joe's saying often a lot of the scientists that disagree are censored. So the only people that we tend to hear about are the opinions that collectively agree, because anyone that dare have a different view is shunned, censored.
I mean, I don't think that's true, Michelle, and I think...
Shouldn't agree with you, June.
Well, I think, it's very easy to say, oh, I don't hear the view that I subscribe to, so therefore it's because it's censored. I mean, that is also going down the route of sort of bonkers conspiracy.
Hang on. I need to challenge that. Are you telling me that you think that people's opinions are not censored if they don't fit in with what has been described as the acceptable narrative?
No, I don't agree with that.
You don't think that views are censored? Are you serious? You're not serious. I'm looking at your face to see whether or not you're actually serious.
There are always, and there have been, almost to a fault, I would say, there have always been, and certainly with other broadcasters, the BBC particularly, maybe not so much in the print media, but there have always been the attempt to balance, not with just sceptics, but with science, to say, no, this isn't true, or this is another thing. The point that's David making. I don't think those views are censored, but I do think it's extremely dangerous, because we are, and the other thing that I'd like to pick up on what David says is stop the war in Ukraine. So what would you do? Have the Ukrainians just roll over and say OK to Putin?
Well, I need to answer your first questions about climate change and censorship.
You're not a climate scientist, though. I do need to point that out.
Well, I have a degree in chemistry, so I do know a lot about the relevant science. But if I can answer your point about censorship, in the 90s, the BBC, which you mentioned, had 2 eminent scientists, environmentalists on there, David Attenborough and David Bellamy. Now, David Attenborough became very much a climate alarmist. David Bellamy said that this is ridiculous. This is not. There's nothing to worry about. Carbon dioxide is not harmful. There is no climate emergency. David Bellamy was totally censored. You didn't see anything much from him from the 90s onwards, but David Attenborough was allowed to go through and was elevated. So you do have that censorship if people have the wrong opinion on climate, on the climate alarmism.
I'm astonished you don't think censorship happens. Like a minute ago, you called David a flat earther. And I even think going down that route, it's kind of what you're trying to say is because he has a different view to you, he's basically some kind of nutter.
OK, well...
And you said conspiracy theorist and you said dangerous, these kind of smear words.
Well, we'll get on to hate speech in a minute. There are conspiracy theorists around, and some of those conspiracy theorists, and the point I was making is that there are a number of people who think that if their view, as I said, the view that they subscribe to is not given as much airtime or as much space as they would like, they think it's censored. I don't agree with that. We have very strict broadcasting rules in this country, as we all know, as you do, Michelle, as a professional broadcaster. It is not the same for newspapers. There are different sort of guidelines. And I would actually argue that the climate emergency has had probably less sensible coverage than it might have done. And I think that part of the problem is because some of it has been rather alarmist. And so it hasn't been a sort of a measured conversation. But I do not think there is censorship against people who can, with all validity and science, back up their view that may be contrary to the view of the majority.
Do you think there was censorship, for example, during COVID? Different topic, but similar principle. Do you think people that had a view that didn't fit the approved narrative were censored?
No.
See, I find that absolutely astonishing.
I mean,
You don't think like people like the people that had the view of the Great Barrington Declaration, which was basically an alternate strategy for lockdown, for those that don't know, they didn't really agree with mass lockdown. It was protection of the vulnerable they were into. You don't think that people like Robert Malone, who was one of the mRNA vaccine creators, he was shut down. You don't think that there was censorship?
I don't think there was censorship. I think, you know, anybody who is an editor, and your colleagues out there will know, you have to weigh up. And, you know, COVID was a public health emergency.
Does that mean there's only one view that's allowed?
No, it doesn't. But it does mean that the information that you put out to the public, if you're the government and you are using the channels that you've got, whether they're posters, adverts or whatever, you do need to be absolutely clear, having made the decision that, you know, washing your hands, wearing a mask, whatever, is supported. That's not the same as censorship. I mean, there was an awful lot of people who didn't agree with it, who didn't agree with the vaccine.
What, visible in this public? Come on.
Well, I think
in this country, Joe, the censorship, what happened with COVID was, I would say, it was a disgrace. It was absolutely disgraceful. And actually, a lot of what we saw was akin to some form of propaganda. The only messages that were allowed platforms, the only voices that were allowed platforms, were people that agreed with the narrative that was a decided and pre-approved narrative. If you tried to write anything on social media, you would have warnings slapped onto your posts. Often people were...
From whom?
The social media platforms. Social media platforms. If you tried to write anything, I don't know, even say about the vaccine creating harm to whoever it was. In fact, I'll give you a good example. One of the ladies that had it confirmed that she had... I don't know how I've got onto this subject, by the way, when I'm talking about Parliament reconvening, but it's an interesting conversation we're having, I think, so we'll let it go. One of the ladies that had doctor-confirmed vaccine side effects, she posted a video on her Instagram with her legs shaking. Instagram banned her account.
Well, you see, I find that astonishing.
Do you find it censorship?
It is censorship if that's indeed what happened.
It is indeed what happened.
But I find that astonishing, given social media platforms are so slow to crack down on things about children, you know, self-harming, suicide videos and that sort of thing. And I find it astonishing that Instagram were that quick to come down on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not actually sure what we achieved in terms of... do we think Parliament should be reconvened? I think we said no on that.
No, we think there's no point.
Right, so that's what we got there.
But we do need government.
On the topic in hand was that, no, the question was, should Parliament be reconvened? The answer from the two panellists was no. Got there in the end. My answer to that, by the way, would be yes. I think it's an absolute odd disgrace that the country is in this situation with seeming crisis absolutely everywhere, but our elected officials are not in their place of work. I can't imagine any other workforce where you'd have complete catastrophe on your watch and your CEO, your CFO and all the rest of it would be off on holiday. You'd be in trouble if that was a business. Anyway, so we got there in the end. No, the panellists don't think Parliament should be reconvened.
We agree.
Joe doesn't even think there's censorship. Which I just think you must have been living in a...
No, I'm not saying there is no censorship.
She did. We've got it on tape. No, I'm sure she said there was no censorship.
No, I'm not saying there is no censorship, ever. What I'm saying is that people think that censorship is the reason that the views that they support don't get the same equivalent coverage.
Well, there you go.
That's not
David
the
is
same.
saying there's no climate emergency. Joe thinks that he is a flat earther. And that's where we got to in part one of Dewbs and Kerr. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about, like hate speech. If you've sent a tweet or something that's not nice, should the police be offering to basically put you on a hate speech awareness course? One police force today has actually scrapped theirs. Will others follow suit? You tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight, we've got the leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. Lots of people crossed with Joe Phillips tonight, I can tell you. Lots of people actually are questioning whether or not there is a climate emergency. Jo is having none of it. She says there absolutely is and that we should be acting. David is having none of that. So saying it's all a little bit alarmist. Let me know, by the way, where do you stand in terms of the Parliament being recalled to deal with some of the issues? One of my viewers makes a good point. He's saying, why? Who is it? David? No, it's not David. David, your email was the one about a fruit salad, which I'm not going to read out at tea time. So, yes, I'd flagged that. I did see it, but I'm not going to be reading that out. Another David, a different David, said, why has no one been talking about recalling Parliament when it comes to dealing with the Channel crossing crisis? Surely that should have been the focus of many. Only now, when it's things like inflation and tax, are they saying it? There you go. Well, you know Gordon Brown's views, don't you, on immigration? I mentioned it, didn't I, at the start of the programme? He was the one. Do you remember he got in his car and Gillian Duffy had said something about immigration and he got in his car and called her a bigot? Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
I remember that very well, actually, and I think that was a very illuminating a little slip-up, a comment there that really showed a lot of people's perspectives in terms of if anyone dares to complain about immigration, how dare you? That's the view, or was the view, certainly, of many politicians.
I think it was certainly a demonstration of always assume your microphone is on and always assume that whatever you say, somebody will have picked it up if you're a politician.
Never go to the toilet wearing a microphone either.
Oh, no, don't.
Have you ever seen Naked Gun? Is it Naked Gun 33 1/3 when he goes to the toilet? No? Everyone's looking at me blankly, but I'm sure that I'm talking sense. I'm sure... Anyway, yeah, let's leave it. People are eating the tea, aren't they? They don't need my toilet stories.
They're looking at their fruit chews.
Yes, fruit chews. That's what Joe was saying that I was come dressed as. It's summer. I think I've come like a ray of summer today. Right, so shall I get myself back on track and talk about what I'm supposed to be doing tonight then? Hampshire Police have scrapped a hate crime awareness course. The force were accused of policing free speech rather than real crime after a controversy involving an army veteran. You might have seen this one. This was the one that was live streamed on the internet. He was arrested for retweeting a meme. That's basically a picture for those that are wondering what I'm talking about. It was basically, it was some flags that was put together in the shape of a swastika. The police were not amused by that. Apparently, it caused anxiety to someone with that tweet. And it was all live streamed. I think there was about 5 police there, and it went absolutely viral. Anyway, the police have now scrapped, or that force has now scrapped that course. A lot of campaigners are really happy, saying it's been a victory over work crime, and that police should get back to tackling real crime. David, where do you stand on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm shocked that they had this hate crime awareness course in the first place, but I don't think this is just Hampshire. It seems to be something going on all over the country with all police forces. But I think we were all shocked at seeing this poor army veteran who'd done nothing more than tweet a picture or retweet a picture, and then they came round and arrested him and then wanted to send him on a course, a re-education course. I mean, this is the sort of thing you expect to happen in China or the old Soviet Union, not in England. In Hampshire, you know, you should have free speech. And this is, someone apparently complained that they were offended by what he said. Well, you know, people can get offended all the time. It shouldn't be a crime to be offended by something, but this does come down to the Communications Act, 2003, Section 127, which says if someone considers something to be grossly offensive, then it's a crime. But the question is, what's the line between offensive and grossly offensive? Because we've seen other things which I would call grossly offensive, where people have just been let off with nothing. You know, there was...
So what's the line in terms of what should be an offence and what shouldn't in your mind? You're saying offensive and grossly offensive. Should being offensive be a crime?
No, it shouldn't be a crime. I mean, I think you should have the free speech to say whatever you like, provided you are not incentivising violence, you know, inciting violence. That should be where the line is. But, you know, this kind of thing, that the picture that he retweeted, it was, you know, some pride flags in the shape of a swastika. I mean, that, yeah, it's offensive to some people. Other people find it funny, but it's not inciting violence. So this is something that police should have nothing to do with. It's a waste of police time. And frankly, the police should be out catching real criminals, fraudsters and burglars and people who do assault and murderers and rapists and things like that.
Chair Phillips, do you agree?
There are only 3 forces, apparently. It's not as widespread as we might think. This 2-hour educational session. I mean, when you get caught for speeding, you are offered the choice of going on a speed awareness course, which is a completely different thing. You know, if you're doing 35 miles an hour and a 30-mile-an-hour limit, there's no argument. You know, you've been clocked, you can avoid getting the points on your licence. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of this was and who was going to judge if it had been successful. The current Police and Crime Commissioner said that she was ending the contract with this company, but she'd inherited it, inherited a restorative justice contract. I mean, it's always very difficult when you go down the route of free speech, because one person's free speech is another person's offence. You know, one person's censorship is another person's protection, if you like. And I do think we all should be mindful, particularly with social media, of the stuff that is perhaps not appropriate. Doesn't mean to say that you should call the police about it, but I think we need to be a little bit braver about calling out people, and particularly in the workplace, and particularly men. You know, they always go, oh, it was a little bit of banter. It didn't mean anything. Well, it does, actually, and it becomes quite corrosive and quite pernicious if you get sexist banter, in the same way as if you get homophobic banter. You know, and it's quite difficult for people to sometimes say, look, I just find this really offensive. And I do think we need to be a little bit more tolerant of the people who find it offensive, and not just say, I've got the right to say what I like, you're just a snowflake if you're offended. But I don't think the police should be involved.
You're talking about the workplace, which is different to this case, which was on social media. So I think on social media, if you don't like something or you feel you might be offended by something, just switch it off. You don't have to be on social media.
Well,
you don't have to look at certain people.
But then that goes
media,
back to the point that Michelle was making about Instagram apparently taking off the...
Do you think you've got the right not to be offended in life?
No, I don't. I mean, there's always somebody who's going to be offended by something. And what offends me might not offend you, might not offend David. I mean, personally, I get incredibly offended by litter-louts. And frankly, I would like to do terrible things to them.
I don't like littering. And I just said, but why would you litter? Why would you be so burn-idle that you can't even pick up your own rubbish and put it in a bin?
Like most women, and women of a certain age, if you challenge people about something like that, you get a mouthful of abuse, and it's quite often sexualised abuse, and it's quite often threatening and unpleasant. But I wouldn't dream of going to the police about it.
Well, in this day and age as well, I think, because I've confronted people about litter before, in this day and age, you've got to be a bit careful, because actually you're in danger of getting slightly more than just a mouthful these days. But you see, it makes me reflect more broadly on the police, the role of the police and the perception of the police does this kind of hate thing. I mean, I saw some images from the weekend, I think I've got some to show you now, of the police in Pride. Is it in Brighton? I can't even read what that says. Yeah. So this is Brighton Pride. So this is police. And if you're listening on the radio, there's some police kind of dancing around. They're in their uniforms. They're dancing. Some of them are waving pride flags. Some of them have got like... I don't even know what you call those things around the necks. I don't know what you call them.
Lanyards.
Oh, no, you mean garlands, the garlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're dancing around in their flags and all the rest of it. Is that what the police should be doing?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is actually a political protest. They've got political aims. They want certain laws to be enacted. And the moment people
Who's there?
The people organising pride marches and the NGOs that support it, such as Stonewall, Mermaids and things like this. Stonewall wants conversion therapy to be banned. So that's a political position. So if the police are going to a march where people organising it have a political position, they are siding with a particular political position. They shouldn't be doing that. They should be there to police it, to make sure that nobody is committing an offence or nobody is hitting anyone or assaulting or maybe even dropping litter. But they should certainly not be taking part in the Pride event, in the march at all.
I don't think Pride events are political. They're not
Absolutely
political
they are.
protests,
They want certain laws.
The whole point, Pride, is being proud of being gay, lesbian, or the people who are on that march. I mean, do you think the police should not be engaging in community engagement, if you like, in Notting Hill Carnival or something like that?
Well, in Notting Hill Carnival, they should be there, and they should be there to do the job of the police, which is to make sure people are safe, to make sure that no assaults happen,
So they stand there grim-faced and they don't look like they're joining in?
Well, absolutely. They should be on the side and they should be making sure that the people there are behaving themselves and not breaking the law. And if they're not breaking the law, they should stand back and let the parade happen.
Isn't it much nicer if everybody's just sort of, it went off peacefully, everybody was happy, everybody joined it. The last thing you want is rows and rows of police standing with their arms folded or,
Well, they don't have to be there standing with their arms folded up. They can be discreet.
Why is that offensive
They can be discreet. Well, look, I'm making the point.
We're talking about
I'm making the point about the Pride Parade. There are political positions. They want certain laws enacted.
Some people do.
And the police should not be getting involved in a parade like that.
For a campaign. It's not like, we're marching for this. They're marching to celebrate.
Well, police should certainly not be wearing rainbows and then perhaps arresting people who don't agree. Maybe there's a counter-protest, for example, to something like that going on, and they would arrest the people who are in counter-protest. You're using this word.
So you don't think the police should be dancing around waving rainbow flags? You're saying it's almost community engagement.
Yeah.
Do you think that police then should be... So that was an event to celebrate sexuality. If there's an event to, say, I don't know, like a BLM march, do you think police should be kneeling in those.
I think it'd be hard to be kneeling if you were on a march, but I know what you mean. But
the protests. Do you think that police should be involved?
That's a protest. Pride is not a protest. Pride is a celebration. That's the point.
So is that your
line?
line? The police can get involved if it's a celebration, but they can't get involved if it's a protest.
If a protest requires different processes to get the permissions that you need, the licences to have road closed and things like that. There is a difference between a protest and a march, a celebration.
So you don't think Pride has become political at all?
No, I'm not saying that, Michelle. I mean, Pride has obviously got political roots, because if you think it is 50 years old this year, and you think that it wasn't that long ago that homosexuality was a crime, and you think of people like Alan Turing, you know, who killed himself having been chemically castrated, and you think about the way that people have had to live their lives, you know, in the shadows, if you like. I mean, Dame Kelly Holmes was recently came out as gay and said she'd had to spend her entire life living a lie, but now she felt comfortable as coming out as gay. And I think that's a sign of a tolerant society.
See, well, you tell me at home then, what do you think? Do you think that police should be getting involved in some of these events? I don't, by the way. I think that the police should be getting themselves involved in policing crime. It would be a really good thing, actually, if rather than dancing around with garlands and whistles and being on their knees and doing on whatever it is, at whatever event it is that they're at, riding the dodgems, by the way. I remember the police, I think it was in Hull, in fact, I'm almost certain it was in Hull a few years ago, a big collection of them on the dodgems at the fair. And I think it's awful. I couldn't even care less if you're on your break. Pack it in, be professional, because I think, actually, we need some respect, authority back in the police. They're not supposed to be your mate, dancing around to whatever it is that you're dancing around to. They're supposed to be watching you, Joe, making sure you're behaving yourself.
Well,
your dance partner.
It would be very interesting to hear, wouldn't it, if there's any serving officers out there about what they feel about it. But I mean, just...
That's a good point. I'm going to a break now, but in a second, I shall be back and I'll be talking about the work ethic of kids. But Joe raises a good point. Is there anyone out there, a serving police officer? What do you think to what you're hearing? Do you think it's right that you should be getting involved in whatever event is going on, if it's a celebration, Joe says? Or do you think that actually you should just be policing the event, which is more David's viewpoint? Get in touch, let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. You can reach me on Twitter @MichelleDewbs. Have a ponder of that, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, and the leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. Nigel Farage will be joining us at 7 o'clock tonight. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us?
Good evening. We'll ask, why are so many Albanians crossing the Channel and not being deported, as they easily could be? We'll look at Gordon Brown's warnings about the economic disaster that's about to befall us and what we should do. Being British, we will, of course, talk about the weather and water shortages. And Jess Conrad will join me on Talking Pints.
Goodness gracious, sounds good. My inbox, I'm looking at Nigel, I'm listening to Nigel, and all I can see to the left of me is beep, 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 beep. It is relentless, people talking about the police. We're looking, by the way, for someone who's a serving police officer. That was Joe's parameter. I want a serving police officer to tell me whether or not you think it's right that police get involved in events. The short version of it is, in my inbox, you can testify this, it's like flying in. All of you pretty much are saying, no, they should police and not party. Thanks to Michael, by the way, for sending me those images of the police on the... It was Hull Fair, I was right. It was Hull Fair 5 years ago. Crikey, do you remember that incident, by the way? All the police riding the dodgems and stuff like that. They say they was off duty, but what are you doing in your uniform then? If you're off duty, get your uniform off, because to me, anytime I see a police officer in uniform, I think that you are representing the force. To me, you're a policeman. If I saw you in your tracksuit, you know, you're probably Dave from down the street, but for me, the differentiator is the uniform. If you've got it on, I think you should be acting professionally as a police person. Did you notice I said police person there, not policeman?
I probably would say policeman, but there you go.
Would you? Police person, is that a thing? It is now.
Police officer is the easiest way, isn't it?
Thank you, Joe. You're there, look, to bring some intellect to this panel. I like it. Police officer is the word that I was looking for, not a police person. Police person. I'm going to make myself laugh. Right, let's move on back onto my topic, shall I? Cost of living crisis. We've all just been talking about it, haven't we? We all know where it's at the moment. Well, if you've got a child, it's bad news for them as well, because a third of parents have cut back on the amount of pocket money that they're giving their children. £4.99, in case you're wondering, is the average pocket money for under 16s. I found that very random, by the way. What, £4.99? What are you going to do with the penny?
Save it for Christmas.
Save it for Christmas. Anyway, it made me think, so it did, David, about the work ethic in kids, because a lot of parents, they use this pocket money to rope their kids into doing some chores and all the rest of it. And life's not what it used to be. I mean, there used to be a lot of Saturday jobs, opportunities for kids to learn a work ethic. Where is it? Where's it gone now?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? But I mean, there's a whole different economy now on social media and the internet. Some kids make money out of doing Instagram or TikTok or these kind of things. I mean, I wouldn't recommend TikTok, but YouTube or something. They do that, and this is a big thing. So there's other ways for kids to make money these days. But if you're a parent and you want your kids to have that work ethic, it's going to be tough for some people, but I think they're going to have to cut down the amount of money, and the kids are just going to have to be a little bit happier getting maybe 30 pence rather than 50 pence for a task or a chore. But there's still ways you can do it.
What about you? Where do you stand?
Well, I think it is a shame. I mean, Saturday jobs. I had a Saturday and a Sunday morning job in a local newsagent, and it was great because you felt as though you were earning quite a lot of money. You could spend the sort of the half day's amount from the Sunday, and it felt important to go to work as a young teenager, and those opportunities aren't around as much as they used to be. Newspaper rounds, that sort of thing. And I think the other thing is that it's actually quite hard for kids, unless it's a very obvious job, like a police officer on a dodgem, for instance, or a hairdresser, or a nurse, or a bus driver. It's quite hard for kids, particularly little kids, to see what any of us grown-ups do for a living, because a lot of us are sitting in front of computer screens. So you could be a scientist, you could be a banker, you could be a journalist, you could be any number of things. And I think that exposure to work is really, really important. And it's quite hard for them to find those opportunities now. So I do think the pocket money thing, I mean, when my kids were little, they got pocket money and they were expected to do things around the house, because that's part of the sort of, living together, the sort of communal thing. And I do know anecdotally from a hairdresser friend of mine that kids who have gone for Saturday jobs, a bit older, sort of 15, 16, they don't know how to put a kettle on. They don't know how to empty a washing machine.
They don't know how to put a kettle on.
And you just
come
sort of
off
think,
it. What kid aged 14 years of age doesn't know how to put a kettle on?
I've worked with grown-ups that don't know how to put a kettle on. I mean, there was a marvellous, whether or not it's true, there was a marvellous story last winter about a girl who'd gone off to university and her granny had given her a hot water bottle, which I think was rather sweet. And the girl had phoned her mum and she said, but I don't know how it works. I don't know where to plug it in.
I mean, there's a word that I could use for that.
I know.
We've just been talking about being nice to everyone, etc. I'm not going to use it, but I just think, for me, it's like almost about, it's just common sense.
Yeah, well, of course.
Where is the common sense? Where do you gain? Because also, the other thing to this is I don't use cash ever anymore, never. So it's like even the value of money, like people are talking here about what pocket money you give your kids, what you used to get as well. It used to be like you learned the value of money.
Yeah.
I do this and then I physically get that.
Yes.
But now you don't even physically get that.
And you could go to the post office, couldn't you, and put it in your savings account and get it out and things
It's a
like
very
that.
recent thing. It's only in the last few years that people have stopped using cash because banks have made it so convenient just to use your card. You need to put the contactless on and so on.
Interestingly, people are going back to cash, apparently, I saw in the paper today.
It's a very good idea. I think it's really important to go back to cash, and especially, for kids like you're mentioning, because they can actually physically feel it. There's something different about physically having the coins and bits of paper in your hand rather than just like a digital number on your screen. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Well, we've managed to find some people that are serving, what did you say earlier? Police officers. About 3 people have written in and told me it's not police officers, it's police constables. So we're both wrong. I was saying police person, right. Joe was saying police officer, but you guys are telling me that it's
Well,
police
they're not all
constable.
constables, are they?
I don't know. There you go. That's what Joe says. You tell me if you're writing in and saying, Michelle, you're both wrong, it's constable. Joe says that she's not wrong. Anyway, you tell me. Gareth says, Michelle, I am a serving police officer and I'm a member of the LGBT community, and I have no issues with officers attending Pride events if it's for public engagement and reassurance purposes. Unfortunately, too many times recently, officers have gone too far and forgotten their purpose for being there and crossed the barrier of acceptable professional behaviour. See, you make an interesting point to me there, Gareth, because what you're saying is, it's public engagement and reassurance purposes. I'm fascinated to learn, what do you mean by that? Is it reassuring to see police dancing around? You mentioned the line of acceptable professional behaviour, and I agree with you there. Gareth... I've just read yours. That was Gareth again. John says, I'm a serving police officer and I hate all the political gestures. Happy to talk to people and be friendly always, but we shouldn't be there to take part. Andrew says, I'm a retired officer now of over 33 years. To me, the job of police is to police parades and not take part. How are you supposed to command respect when you are taking part? David says, it's all totally embarrassing. You're harsh. Right, that's all we've got time for.
I think we'll have to return to this one.
Yes, we shall return. Joe and David, thank you very much for your company. Thank you at home for yours as well. Have a fantastic evening and I'll see you tomorrow.
Evening, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Pretty warm today, but temperatures are only going to rise through the rest of this week. And if you're after rainfall, well, you're out of luck. It's going to be dry for the vast majority, certainly through this week, thanks to this area of high pressure. Now, it's not completely fine and sunny everywhere. We've had this weather front across northern Scotland today, bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain, and that will continue on and off across the Northern Highlands, the Western Isles and the Northern Isles through the night. Elsewhere, though, most places dry with light winds. We could just see a little bit of mist and fog forming through the early hours across parts of eastern England, but it's not going to last on Tuesday morning. A warmish night, but not that oppressive. Temperatures are going to be rising, though, both by day and by night through the rest of this week. It is going to be another sunny day then for the vast majority on Tuesday. Quite a lot of cloud across northern Scotland still, but not as much in the way of rainfall. The rain tending to ease, except perhaps in Shetland. But even here it may turn dry come the afternoon. Quite a bit of cloud across the northwest and the breeze picking up here then, but elsewhere lots of sunshine, temperatures mid to high 20s, probably topping out at 30 Celsius tomorrow somewhere across the southeast. On Tuesday evening, again, it's fine, it's dry and it's sunny. Perhaps a bit more of a breeze picking up across Kent and suddenly getting quite windy across the far northwest where it will stay predominantly cloudy. maybe 1 or 2 light showers as we head into Wednesday. But again, for most places, Wednesday is another sunny day. If anything, sunnier across the Highlands and certainly through Orkney, where we could see temperatures up to 19 or 20. And elsewhere, we'll be in the mid-20s widely, high 20s across the south, probably peaking in the low 30s somewhere close to London. Again, some coasts will be cooler, where there'll be some pleasant sea breezes developing. The outlook is for more of the same. Hints of a change into next week, but for the vast majority of the sunshine continuing into the weekend and temperatures rising further.
As the race for number 10 intensifies, we are giving you the chance to get to know our next Prime Minister. We've invited the 2 candidates to meet you, the GB News viewers, and let you put your questions to them. Head directly to gbnews.uk or send me your questions to questions@gbnews.uk.
Join Alistair Stewart for the People's Forum with Liz Truss. Wednesday at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would